or folks, or whoever the hell you are. Welcome.
Gendered term, Danny. Way to start the fucking podcast, my guy. Man. All right, well, I guess I'll keep going.
I would
Danny.
like to believe, and I'm trying to be like a proponent of this, and I know I'm not the only one that for guys to be a gender neutral term. And remember, I used to say ladies and gentlemen, and now I purposefully altered it to folks to be more inclusive.
Understood.
And then I used guys today because I just casually always say guys, like, hey guys.
Yeah, I get it.
Just a group of folks,
Dude,
group of peeps that
no worries.
it's always like that. But regardless, hey, welcome to the episode of the Artenders with Mac and Dan. I am Dan. He is Mac.
Howdy.
This is an art review show where we dissect pieces of art, may it be movies, TV shows, etc., sometimes video games or music, and really to learn and become better students of art and just absorb this material.
You would be learning at the same rate that we are learning. That's the ideal world for this podcast.
But we're also insanely self-absorbed.
True.
We're definitely not self-absolved.
Also, just know that Just know that 90% of the takes in this show are prisoner of the moment takes.
Yeah.
Things that we're feeling because we just viewed it and we're feeling very passionate.
I think it's also important to say that parts of this show is modeled after a sports radio show, and of course, some of our takes are bombastic, are ridiculous, and should always be taken with a grain of salt.
Isn't that sports radio?
Exactly. Oh no, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that if you're viewing this show for the takes, that's not what we're here for. View the show for the lessons. That's what the show's about. No, not like we're teaching lessons, but that we are consuming lessons. We are learning, exactly.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Few just house cleaning up rules, whatever. Mac, please get out the penalty board.
House cleaning.
So there was I think this was episode 69. I corrected Mac on how to pronounce the name Gene Cousineau.
Yes.
Most characters on the show pronounce the name as Gene Cousineau, right? He pronounced it as Gene Cousineau. I caught him on that, and I corrected him. And he got a point for it. The thing was that, in season 3 of Barry, which we will review later on. Oh, by the way, we're doing season 2 of Barry right now. That's what we're reviewing.
That's what
today.
we're reviewing. We'll get to that.
Yeah. I'm sure you read the episode title. Okay. But so the thing was, in season 3, Gene Cousineau pronounces his own name as Gene Cousineau. And so then the sort of legitimacy of this accusation that I proponed onto Mac was brought into question. And so the thing was okay, is there another character in the show that pronounces that name as Gene Cousineau prior to season 3, where both Mac and I would have watched and would have seen? Mm-hmm. Fuchs is a character in this show played by Stephen Root, and he pronounces the name Gene Cousineau as Gene Cousineau in the very last episode, or second to last episode, I believe, of season 2 of Barry. And therefore, because I corrected Mac and I was wrong, I received 2 penalty points because of this. And Mac is, technically his point would be rescinded, but it didn't matter in the end, because I will eventually wear a costume. So with that being said, I now have 3 points. Mac still has 0 at the present moment. So we'll see how this goes. Now, we are going to be reviewing season 2 of Barry, a wonderful show on HBO that is created by Alec Berg and Bill Hader, and it stars Bill Hader.
I just got a point.
You just smacked the microphone.
Just hit the mic.
Oh, well, you may as well just add one for yourself. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful show. Barry season 2 follows the story of Barry Berkman, who is an assassin turned actor. Assassin turned actor, and season 2 is just a continuation of his story and the continuation of the consequences that he has to face because of his actions in season 1. It also has to do with Sally, played by Sarah Goldberg, and her relationship with the business that is acting, as well as her past relationship with her abusive boyfriend, Sam, as well as Gene Cousineau, and played by Harry Winkler.
Gene.
And I believe, did I say his name incorrectly? Because I said Harry Winkler, and I meant Henry Winkler, and I caught myself.
You did catch yourself.
But point being, and his relationship with Janice, who is now dead because of Barry, spoiler alert, and overcoming that and trying to navigate new relationships in his life and deal with grief. And what's really interesting is, I guess, like, maybe the big key word for this season, right, is grief.
Yep.
And how do we deal with grief, and how do we get past grief, and how do we live with grief, right? And it's very different things that all these characters experience different aspects of, right?
What were the parts of the show for you that that you felt led you to this season is about grief? What were the parts of it, or maybe even what were some ways that you saw that they directed scenes, or that you saw dialogue happen, or things like that, where you were constantly hit over the head with, okay, there is a recurring theme here. I understand where they're coming from. What were the things that led you to the word grief?
Well, there's a core sort of like plot point throughout this season where the acting class in Gene Cousineau teaches, right, put on a show where they're essentially like performing and making themselves vulnerable in front of an audience and having their own little snippets about themselves, about like the most like traumatic point in their life, or the most like life-altering event.
I will say I'm really glad they did, because just that idea of like theater troupe of amateur actors all with monologues about like the worst things ever happened to them, is a hotbed for comedy. Like that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Because that shit would so happen in real life, and it would be that uncomfortable.
Well, and what makes it funny in this particular case is the like lack of perspective for those characters telling those stories.
Right.
For a lot of them, like, they don't realize how ridiculous they are in
which I
want to
get to that. I want to get to that.
But then there's the like one moment, and it's so brief, and I didn't really catch it on my first watch, and this is both you and I's our second watch of this particular season, where towards the end you have the one character, Jermaine, right, who's a pretty minor character played by Daryl Britt Gibson, and his little like grief segment is about his dad being taken by aliens, is what his mom told him, which is just absurd, which is just absolutely absurd. But it's super duper real to him.
Right.
And it's this wonderful line that the entire show walks that's both really funny and just really sad.
Yeah.
And so he's having that experience.
And doesn't he at the end like make some beautiful monologue about him?
So he does that piece, and his mom told him that, he was abducted by aliens, and then years later he just saw him outside of like a gas station, his dad, asking for money.
Yeah.
And it's just like a really sad, poignant moment for him, but it was led by such a massive amount of honesty. And it's once again this beautiful thing that this show sort of leads itself on, is that even though it's hilarious moments, and even though it's absolutely ridiculous moments with sometimes absolutely ridiculous dialogue, ridiculous characters, right, these characters are much, much, much larger than life for sure. But yet also writing that line of, okay, but what is the honesty for these characters?
Yeah, I think that is something that is oftentimes flipped and inappropriately so in comedy, is that you often see, like an honest moment or an honest looking moment that ends with a joke, and it's like it's honesty that's actually like very secretly rooted and founded in ridiculousness.
Yeah.
And Barry does a genius job of flipping that, and instead of it being an honest moment, breaking of expectations to make you laugh at the end, it is ridiculousness at the very end, revealing itself as honesty. And I think that is so genius.
Or even just honesty just interwoven into it. Like, a very easy example, right? And it's a pretty tame example, but I think it's still a good example, is Barry tells a particular story to Gene, right, about the time that Barry killed an innocent person in Afghanistan, I believe, is the country that he was deployed in when he was in the military. And Barry killed an innocent person and got away with it. And he shares this story in a moment of vulnerability to, like, kind of in a sort of confession sort of way, right?
Yeah.
This Catholic idea of like cleansing the soul because you have, put this, the story into the universe of this awful thing that you did in order to like absolve yourself from the sin of committing it, and it doesn't in pursuit of forgiveness, right? And that's exactly what he does. But of course, this is shocking to Gene because Barry killed a man and got away with it, not knowing that Barry's also an assassin. But Barry killed a man and got away with it.
Yeah.
And there are like 5 different times that Gene like tells Barry in private, it's like, yeah, Barry, do what you need to do. I mean, like, yeah, for the love of God, don't tell this story because after all, you killed a man and got away with it. And it's like, it's very funny because it's the repetition and it's the shock that Gene experiences, but it's very, very honest to him because it's like, holy shit, like, oh my God, it's how can he can't even fathom it, right? And so it's such an outlandish idea for Gene, so he just ends up repeating it over and over again. But that's what makes it so funny because he just can't believe it.
Right.
It's a small thing like that.
That beautiful dramatic irony that we all know and love. I feel like if there was in most other shows like a common plot line would look like like you saw someone experiencing something like in some dramatic way and they were like really invested in some moment, right? And then at the very end, like you pan out and it's actually something ridiculous. And to see this do the exact opposite, I think is really, really clever. But something that you were saying earlier about the it not being ridiculous to the people in the moment, I think is something that is very new. It's not something that has happened a whole lot.
It's not common for sure.
Well, yeah, it's definitely not common. But I really hope that it's starting to become more mainstream because it is very, very clever, which is the highlighting the ridiculousness of something by making it completely normal looking.
Yeah. And that's what leads this show to be a sort of dark comedy. And like, I'm sure if you ask Bill Hader and Alec Berg, like they're just going to say, no, this is a story first. And in some ways, like the story of the show sort of like, I discredit the writers a lot by what I'm about to say, but like it sort of like writes itself, I guess.
Sure.
But like focusing on like what these characters will do, and that's when the funny comes.
Right.
Even if like some of the shit they do is like really freaking dark, like the fact of at the very end, right? You have Hank hiding from Barry because Barry is shooting up the monastery. It's that still manages to be a funny moment, but it's a very honest moment for that character's experience. And it is something that I would like to see further explored by other shows that dabble in comedy.
Right. Well, I think that part of the thing that makes it so clever is the fact that all of these insane moments are not, it's not like you're taken out of the drama of the series, because this is a drama, I would say.
Yes.
You're never taken out of the drama of it, and I think that's what makes it maybe even funnier, is the fact that all of these funny concepts are shot with such stark and brutal honesty, like you're talking about, that there's that's honestly what makes it even funnier is the fact that it means so much to these people. Like, for instance, the alien thing, funny concept, and it's made even more interesting by the fact that like in a deadly serious way, he actually really truly believes that to his core. And there's
not a moment as an audience member where you're like, oh, this is just a joke.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think another thing that makes the entire series, not just the season, the entire series so awesome is, and I'm give my gold medal here. Get ready.
Okay.
Is the sound design.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. If you could look up a name, that'd be awesome. Sorry.
Sure.
I don't really have one.
Give me a name.
That the sound design of the show is deceptively important, in that I think that this sound design has a lot more to do with its tone than meets the eye or meets the ear, I suppose. And I think that the tone of this show is one of the things that makes it so special and so unique in comparison to everything else being made or that has been made so far.
The people, the two individuals that are the most responsible for sound design, for the most part, is both Rickley W. Dumb and Sean Hessinger, who worked on every episode, including season 3.
Okay, sweet.
So, but they have a big hand. I like they have pretty long descriptions as to their responsibilities.
Okay.
It looks like Rickley W. Dumb is the official sound designer, but I imagine this pot has a lot of hands in it.
Right. Well, it seems so because not just the choices, but the like specific moment to moment editing is really interesting because I think that the music, as well as like the specific sound effects and what you're hearing and what you're not hearing at any given moment, they do it in such a specifically stylized way in terms of like all of the sound design. If you were to like not even pay attention to the words they were saying and just listen to the sounds, it would tell you that it is either at any given moment either a thriller or an action movie. They really only use sounds that are action or thriller based. And a lot of their music as well, other than maybe like the theme song or like the intro song or whatever, like just that brassy thing. I love that, by the way. Oh, I'm in love with that. I want to steal it so bad.
It always breaks the tension.
It's
then
so smart.
when that bombastic brass sound is not there, then it's like, oh shit, there is a lot of tension right now. Like so much so that the intro couldn't be there to break it.
But it also, like, because of the brass and because of like the melody they choose, it's almost not like James Bond-esque, but it's very action movie-esque. In that it gives you this like wonder and adventure feeling that you get from watching like a summer blockbuster action movie, which is so smart. But anyways, the fact that they keep rooting all of this music and these sound effect choices in action and thriller is like usually like what makes all the tension of the show. I remember very few shows where I was this stressed the whole time. It really takes me back to, and I know this is like not really a Barry type show, Breaking Bad. Whenever I watched Breaking Bad, I binged it. Binged the first 3 seasons all at once. I was a teenager. And I had to stop watching the show because I started getting like really panicky. Like my chest was tight all the time and like I couldn't like operate. And I remember I was binging it like over a week or something. So like by like the 4th or 5th day, I'd be like eating dinner with my family and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "I don't think I am." And they're like, "You need to stop watching the show," because it made me really stressed because of largely due to the sound design. And this put me in a kind of similar spot where I've had to pace myself intentionally because watching it like too fast does really stress me out. The show does a great job at that, and I think that has a lot to do with the sound.
And that, I mean, that right there, I would say speaks to the masterclass that is the show in its entirety, where like, I'm not sure whether or not Barry or Breaking Bad, like which show is the better show, but what I will tell you is that like Barry is a much funnier show than Breaking Bad. But I would say in terms of tension that I would say Breaking Bad has just as much tension. Barry has, you know what I'm trying to say. They both have equal amounts of tension. And which is more impressive because like Barry is only 30-minute episodes. And 8-episode seasons, while Breaking Bad is something like 12 episodes, hour-long each. So it's like, in terms of runtime and in terms of the time that it takes to tell the story, it's impressive that Barry manages to be that efficient, essentially. I also want to speak on really fast on the sound design aspect that you're totally right when the music is definitely like, in a way, in the first season, a little bit wackier, a little bit more mellowed out, but it plays more to the experience that is Barry of being an assassin and becoming an actor, and definitely speaking to like the brassy big band of the intro, like the 10-second jingle, of like giving you the expectation that this is a different show, and it actually plays really, really well into the blend of that is the entire story. And what was something that was really interesting is that in the very end of the second season, and I didn't realize that necessarily this music was missing, but there was like a constant motif of like a pretty mellow piano that happens throughout the first season that just kind of like plays throughout the show. At the end of the second season, when the cops find the Chechen pin that is in the trunk that has Janice's body.
Yeah.
It has that mellow, tune, that motif that consistently played in the first season. And once I heard that, I'm like, oh shit, I don't think I heard that at all during this season. And so it kind of reminded me of like, Barry's back on that bullshit of just barely getting away with something.
But I think what was so clever is that they kept programming us to, in the first season, be a little stressed, and then the stress would be released by that piano.
Super easily.
And like that piano was the subconscious sign to release. Yeah. To, everything's okay, relax.
Barry got away with stuff pretty dang easily in the first season.
Yeah, and because they did not in the second season play that until the very end, like what you're saying, I will say I had the experience of I never felt relaxed or released until they played that until the very end.
And part of that is silence during like some intense scenes, right? Like it's a very specific choice. Like I don't remember a music of any sort being played when Sally is in the hotel room with Sam, her abusive ex-boyfriend.
Makes sense to me, yeah.
And then Sally opens the door to leave, and then neither Sam nor Sally see Barry, who's right outside the door with a gun about to shoot Sam, and then Barry sees and notices that, oh shit, Sally is there as well. And that's like an immensely tense scene that happens because it's this beautiful story.
So good.
Arc of like Barry battling his demons and the sort of antithesis of like trying to free himself from those demons, but he can't live without them in a sort of way that like once again he is brought to his acting work, and a big part of his like acting story in this season is developing a deeper relationship with his like violent past, right? Mm-hmm. With the fact of him shooting the three as they call them sheepwalkers in the distance, right? That was Barry's the best day of his life. But you can tell like when he's trying to write that story to present to the class that he wants to get away from that story because he feels deeply shameful about it, even though that is the best day of his life. That in one scene when he performs, I believe this is this may be episode 7, when he performs the scene with Sally when Sally
I think so,
has to unfortunately experience the awfulness that was her ex-boyfriend, and Barry is portraying the ex-boyfriend. Barry calls back, right? Essentially, in a way, calls back, uses not necessarily substitution, to when he killed Janice, right?
Yeah.
It's this like relationship that's like festering with his past that I think like this season does really well, that even though like Barry's not necessarily doing assassin jobs in this, he just cannot escape his past, and it comes up in very different ways for him.
And it's super funny that they use acting as a form of therapy, in that like we both know that's very common. A lot of people do that, and it is super inappropriate and not helpful to anyone, like most of the time. But it's funny that they are able to, for the purposes of the show, use their acting and their acting classes as therapy, while simultaneously showing how it's dumb and funny and a bad idea.
Yeah,
like it's really smart. They're able to use both at the same time. But yes, the other thing that I was thinking about as you were talking is the idea that it's earned silence. It's not just silence for the sake of being silent. They really earn it by doing this. Like in the first season, they play music in all of those tense moments, or at the end of the tense moments, to tell you to release, right? And I think what's so clever about all these tense moments in the second season that you're talking about without music is that they've trained us to expect the music. So whenever the music is not there, it hits way harder.
Yeah.
And if from season 1 they did not play the music, I don't think that would have been as effective. I think that there was a lot of things, because with season 1 there were quite a few critiques that we had overall, especially in terms of just like genre and style and things like that. That now I'm starting to see in season 2 were very intentional. And it was I guess this was another classic case of I loved season 1.
Yeah.
But I don't think I gave it enough credit. Like of how much heavy lifting they actually did in season 1.
Yeah,
You know what
I mean, well, I guess, yeah, they do that heavy lifting per se in season 1, right? They create that structure so they can really hit a stride in the second season and like break free from that structure that they created. That the structure is that Barry is learning lessons through the acting class, and it's like, okay, that's the structure, so like we can grow Barry as a character. And now Barry has to deal with the consequences around him, and the other characters have to deal with the consequences that Barry put in front of them as well. It's a wonderful thing that I think the second season advocates. I would still say though that I prefer the second season over the first season, but for sure absolutely. We wouldn't have the second season without the first season.
I think it's because it's Avengers Endgame. It's capitalizing. It's capitalizing on what's already there.
We keep wanting to bring up like Avengers movies,
but
they're the simplest. They're the simplest
that's
examples.
The thing. It's like they're just the most obvious, and like, you know, it's like whenever you're in class or like whenever you're teaching stuff, you always have to try and find examples that all the kids know. So you go to Disney and you're like, okay, let's use Shrek or Frozen or some crap like that. I know that Shrek is
dated.
I know,
buddy.
Wow,
you're showing your age.
Oh, jeez. But I can bring those up and most of the kids will know it, you know? Sure. Whereas, I feel like just the average viewer will know Avengers. But the thing with Endgame is that you get to Endgame, and again, don't want to discredit the work of the writers, but at the same time, it's really just like capitalizing on everything that's already been done. Like the heavy lifting, the difficult tasks have already been completed. You're really just like closing out a lot of loose ends, you know?
Yeah.
And season 2, although it's not closing these loose ends, it's definitely playing on all this stuff that, like we were talking about, has already been set up really, really well in the first season.
Yeah. And a show that wants to be safe, right? Like, wouldn't explore the loose ends of Sally at the end of season 1 saying that she was in an abusive relationship, or even opening that door, right? And Janice being killed at the end of season 1, and Jean having to deal with the grief of that and trying to like live his life outside of that, and then realizing like what should I value in this life that I'm living. And I think it's this still beautiful thing where these primarily it's Sally and Jean, right, that are also getting wonderful bits of development, that the show isn't just about Barry himself, but the show is about what Barry has done to these people. Yeah. And I think it's an absolute treat to watch in its entirety. When we come back, we are going to discuss my potential sizzle serve, and we're just gonna see where it takes us, my friend.
We're just gonna see. All right, and welcome back, Danio. We left off with you kind of teasing us with your sizzle serve. So, since we're back from break, give it to us, man. What's the serve?
I think this episode is the best episode in this show so far. It is episode 5 of season 2. The episode is titled Ronnie/Lily. It is the very strange episode.
Yeah.
Where Barry and Fuchs are sent off to kill Ronnie Proxon.
Yeah.
A short story about Ronnie Proxon. He is having sex with Detective Loach's wife, and Detective Loach knows that Barry killed Janice, Janice Moss. And so is essentially using that as leverage. And it's this entire, like, one-off episode where it's a lot of, like, one-shots, right?
Yeah.
Very slow pans as well. And just like pretty slow in that regard, but yeah. And so essentially Barry finds out that Ronnie is a Taekwondo master, and once Barry breaks Ronnie's windpipe, because even though like Barry was trying to convince Ronnie to just leave, but Ronnie of course tries to defend himself. Of course, the Taekwondo master. All of a sudden Ronnie's daughter comes home. And Ronnie's daughter is named Lily.
Oh, yeah.
And Lily all of a sudden becomes an actual monster.
Yes.
And out of nowhere, right? Like, this series had no precedent for this episode. Yeah. It is the absolute most what the shock episode because you
It's
expect
so
it out of
funny,
nowhere,
though.
and then all of a sudden the show becomes a borderline horror film
Yes.
where you have.
But it's really funny.
Because it's really funny because then also like what they do is that they use wires on the kid, so it kind of looks like she's like doing these really long jumps, but you can tell that they're using wires because it doesn't look authentic
God,
for a
yeah.
human, and so it looks very unhuman.
What
but
was
actually,
that episode? Oh my
it
God.
adds to the effect of the absolute insanity. And then at one point, right, she jumps onto the car, the SUV
Yeah, I was
that
about to
Fuchs
say,
and
yeah.
Barry is in.
Yeah.
She climbs in without their knowing, and then she grabs onto Fuchs's cheek with her teeth.
Yeah.
And just stays there, and Fuchs is like, "Please, just shoot her, Barry. Just kill her." And Barry's like, "I can't do that, man." And then Fuchs is like, "Just do it!" And then she rips off Fuchs's cheek, and he's screaming in absolute terror. She jumps out of the car. She runs in front of the car. She's just in the headlights in the darkness, and she, in like the most like terrifying, like a Wendigo. She screeches
A
into
Wendigo?
the night.
What's a Wendigo?
It's like a chupacabra. She with blood dripping down her face, and then Fuchs is just yelling, "What are you?" It is absolutely
And that's
hilarious.
your number one? That's your number
That's
one
my
episode?
number one episode because I remember the first time watching this episode, I'm like, "What the hell did I just watch?"
I definitely remember it being the quickest episode.
In what way?
In that storyline happened, and I really thought that was going to be just like a small segment of the episode, and then the episode was over, and I was like, was that the whole episode? That was so fast. And I think it was partially because I was laughing so hard. Like, that was definitely one of the funniest episodes, I would have to say.
But that is one of the episodes where I would say it actually kind of gets into the darker ends of it, right?
Yeah.
Particularly in terms of tone and like how it's shot, that it's not like a bright, funny, comical episode in the traditional sense of comedy,
no,
right?
no.
It's just these absurd things that are happening, and it's like what we said in the first part, that it's real to these characters that it's happening to. But
definitely
for
a
us,
dark comedy.
Yes, and for us as the observer, like, this is so absurd, it's hilarious. But what they're experiencing is completely traumatic.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's the funny parts are they're not punchline funny. They're not like, this is where you're supposed to laugh. It's more like, this thing is happening, and it's so ridiculous, but it's being shot and dealt with by these actors and characters as something that is totally normal and possible.
Yes.
And I think that's where the funny comes from. It's not that, like, it's her ripping his cheek off. For some people is funny, for other people isn't funny, but in my mind, like, that's not the funniest part. The funniest part for me is, like, the fact that she bites his cheek in the first place is funny. Or, like, probably the hardest that I laughed, I think, was her, like, the image of her jumping from the tree, from the roof, like a superhero jump that was just, like, so fictional, but it was dealt with in such a real and honest way that, like, that killed me. Like, how are we not acknowledging the fact that all of a sudden the rules of this world are not real,
broken, right?
And now there is just, like, superheroes in this world. It's so funny.
And that the show, like, all of a sudden really dips its toe. When I say dips its toe, I mean, like, sticks the whole damn foot into like this, like, surrealist or absurdist magical realism of like all of a sudden what this show becomes. And what's nice is that I will say a little bit, it's not the last time the show does this.
Oh, really?
It dips its toe into magical realism sort of thing that, like,
that's
actually
exciting.
pays off, where what it's done is that, like, it's not a sort of like trope or like a mechanic per se or a gimmick of the entire show, but, like, it will pull it out for storytelling purposes. And the show writers don't limit themselves, right? Alec Berg and Bill Hader don't limit themselves to the rules that are reality.
Right.
They give themselves permission in order to create this effective story.
Well, I think what's so awesome is that because they have rooted themselves so well, and because they have really established such a I hate to use the word grounded, but, like, such a like foundation as Barry, and he's just so nonchalant and so calm and so realistic in his responses.
But
Right, but like mellow in his
depressed,
responses.
I would also probably say.
Right, but
suffering from some PTSD.
But in like whenever he a lot of his responses are more silent or quiet than they are. He's much more that character. I think that they've done such a good job of earning this absurdity.
Yes, they earned this episode.
They earned this episode, and they've earned a lot more, which is honestly maybe one of the things that I was most shocked about in terms of season 2 is like, I think that they could have pushed the ballot a lot more and I would have stayed with them. And so I'm glad to hear that in season 3 they do, because yeah, I think that they have earned
like taking
quite a
risks
lot
in terms of like direction and and story.
Right. Well, I mean, like for instance, one of the most recent examples we were talking about was Everything Everywhere All at Once, right? Is that the show or the movie doesn't start off with just like hitting you in the face with absurdity. It's more like it lays a really decent and relatable foundation for you, and then like it slowly starts pushing the pedal and like revs itself up until by the end it's just like smacking over the head with all this absurdity. And I feel like Barry has earned, not the same way obviously, but
no, because Barry doesn't like necessarily ease on the pedal. Like it's all of a sudden like, yeah, we're going at this
5 miles
speed,
an hour
and like
and
you're
100.
comfortable at this speed, right? Like we've been comfortable at this speed for a long time. Okay, and now we're gonna really push it.
Right. And I think it's earned more of those moments than it's giving itself credit for.
Yeah.
I think that might be the one thing that's holding back season 2 that I'm interested to see what they do in season 3, is that I think they have earned more than they are willing to accept or willing to admit.
So you would like more episodes akin to Ronnie/Lily? Stylistically, perhaps.
Sure, right.
Maybe not like in terms of pacing,
think
because like the entire episode is just this like one quasi-contained story where Barry is trying to kill Ronnie, and he isn't trying to kill Ronnie, but it's like it's that altercation with Ronnie,
right,
and in turn Ronnie's daughter.
Sure, and I think that I think they can do a better job of advancing plot and things like that, but at the same time, I think I think that they have definitely earned a lot more magical realism, like you were talking about, a lot more fantasy, or even just like a more abstract way of exploring these really difficult mental health concepts that they try to explore.
Yeah.
I think they've earned more of that than they're willing to give themselves permission for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think so. But like even then, I'm not sure if I would change anything in season 2. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Which is again why I'm. It's not as much a I would change season 2. It's more of a I really hope that they acknowledge that in season 3. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which we'll get to. But before that, Danny, we need to have a little roll call.
Yeah.
A little roll call.
We did this with the first season of Barry. Just
Right.
to like sort of like quick analysis of like individual characters' development,
Right.
and or performances given by their respective
Absolutely.
actors. This is a beautiful ensemble show, no doubt.
And I think that this is a very nice and succinct way of just like running down the list. It's very organized. It feels good. It feels good to do this.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just gonna start running down.
Yeah.
And you tell me how you feel. Okay.
Sweet.
Bill Hader's Barry Berkman.
I think there's like a wonderful amount of like growth and like still once again playing into like the dealing with grief and how do we navigate with this grief and how we talked about it in the first season as well of like dealing with consequences, and I think that is very well explored in this season as well. And I think what was really nice, and first of all, Bill Hader without a doubt does a great job. That doesn't go without saying, but that goes without saying.
Yes. Yeah.
That goes without saying, but it has to be said. But what I will say is that one development that I think is really good for this season is that Barry becomes his own sort of Fuchs, his own sort of mentor to other people, primarily the Chechen army that Hank is trying to create. And like you have Mayor Beck, who is like the prodigy, right, essentially. And Mayor Beck looks up to Barry the same way Barry used to look up to Fuchs. And I think that's a wonderful thing that Barry has to deal with.
Yeah.
It's a smart way of putting your character in that particular scenario where they have to deal with the consequences of that particular action, as
Yes.
well as like he has to deal with the consequences of killing Janice but still trying to maintain a relationship with Jean. You know, he has to deal with the consequences of he's a very violent person.
Yeah.
And Sally is still in some ways dealing with the violent shit from her ex-boyfriend from years past.
Yeah, right.
It's a wonderful place to put that character, and Bill Hader does a really good job of just like, and what's really cool is that like, not cool, but that character is lonely.
Yeah.
You know, and Hader just nails it to upteenth degree, and like when he's angry, it's absolutely terrifying, which is nice.
Well, and also he does such a good job of writing to his strengths.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Bill Hader, I think something that he talked about for season 1 of Barry, way back when, is that it's really rooted in a lot of Bill Hader isms, because he's always been this like comedy character actor type guy, and he got to a point where he was like, that's not really me, and like people expect me to be this like super happy, fun loving, like sociable guy.
Yeah.
But that's not really what I am. I'm a very anxious person, you know, and so it's good that he wrote himself a character that him and Alec Berg both wrote this character that I think really lies in his strengths, and I think very well deserved, earned for both season 1 and season 2 best leading actor in a series at the Emmys.
Sure, yeah.
I think both very, very earned.
Yeah.
Stephen Root's Fuchs.
He's still on the same slimy bullshit, but I love the exploration of how much Fuchs cares about Barry.
Yeah.
And then the moment, but what's really nice is that, once again, I say really nice about something that's really sad and disappointing in terms of like emotion. But when Barry is just straight up like, "Fuck off, I'm done with you," and just cursing him to hell, essentially, how Fuchs immediately like tries to do his own thing and tries to ruin Barry, right?
Yeah.
And it goes to show how much Barry didn't care. How much Fuchs didn't care about Barry. And it's a beautiful sort of like arc that he goes on,
right.
that like it does make you question, does Fuchs actually care about Barry at all? And I think in some degrees yes, in some degrees absolutely not.
Right.
And Stephen Root is such a wonderful character actor and just really breathes through his lines. And we talked about it in the first season. We talked a lot
about his
and how he listens to the other person's response while he's speaking, and it's like this, like it's as if he's trying to disarm a bomb every single line,
which he is. He is the
that's essentially the objective for almost all of his scenes. It's like disarming a bomb.
Right. Well, another thing that I think is very interesting about the way that they set the show up is that all of the killers, all of the gang members, all of the assassins, anyone that's in the show that's supposed to be this like super badass, like, you know, crime evil person or whatever.
Yeah.
All of those people are all acting out of love.
Yeah.
Every one of them's acting out of passion and love. And all these people that pride themselves on passion and love and empathy, all the actors, all are not. For pretty much the most part, except for Gene Cousineau, who once he starts having these feelings for Janice, and once he actually starts getting that love that he's always kind of wanted, he starts like backing away more and more from the class and from acting. And then once he has had full heartbreak, like pretty much decides to leave. And then of course, you know, he comes back and we'll see what happens there. But I just think it's very interesting that like they do that swap of like all of the crazy people that are doing awful crimes are doing these crimes out like from a place of love. Like Esther is, you know, is mad and like ready to kill NoHo Hank.
Yeah.
Because she has this connection with Cristobal by the end, right? Or like,
would we say? I mean, it looks more like a business relationship and maybe like a camaraderie of sorts.
I think she's jealous.
Well,
You
of
see her
course she's
face?
jealous. Yes, of course she's jealous, but like I think you're overselling it is what I'm trying to say.
But we can agree that Noho Hank and Cristobal have a serious connection.
Yes.
I
mean, we saw that leg rise up when
we
Cristobal's
saw the leg rise up.
Yeah.
100%.
When they were hugging. Yeah.
Big time.
Trying to wrap the whole body around him like a spider monkey.
That Barry has found this love that he's like fighting for now, right?
Yeah. And like Gene Cousineau has become the mentor that like Barry has always been seeking and trying to seek the love that's there, even though he killed his lover. Yeah.
Right. And then and again, like you said, you can make the debate that even though like it's a debate, it's not fact, but it's a debate that Fuchs is doing a lot of what he's doing because he cares for Barry.
Yeah.
That's possible. Like he's like, I'm sorry, Barry, but you cannot live this life. Like, this is not your life.
And that's what Gene does too. And they're wonderful foils to one another. And yet,
beautiful.
at the same token, right, they're probably the most narcissistic people in this show.
Yeah. Yes.
The most
Gene
self-absorbed.
and Fuchs.
Yes, I mean, there's nobody that they love in this universe more than their reflection.
Fair, yeah.
For those characters.
Yeah.
And they both love Barry in their own ways.
Exactly.
And both, like, yeah.
Do you think that's us getting a small peek at either Bill Hader's or Alec Berg's psyche? That might be a
the exploration of narcissism and love, or what do you mean?
No, the exploration of role models or father figures, like caring more about themselves than about the person that they're raising.
Maybe. I mean, maybe that's just a theme that they wanted to explore.
It's a really interesting one. I love it.
Yeah, and I think it's a theme that works really well in the construction that is this show.
Yeah. Now, on this exploration of love that we're talking about, Sarah Goldberg's Sally Reed.
Gold medal.
Gold medal.
I love the journey that Sally goes on throughout this entire season. That it's kind of like split twofold, right? Where you have the first part dealing with Sam, her ex-boyfriend, and then you have the second part, like half of it is dealing with her ex, and then the other half is dealing with like the demands of the acting industry. And it's what it is that I enjoy watching characters that are forced to do something, right? That you have these other forces, these other characters imposing their will upon them.
Yep.
And then you have this character desperately trying to like break free from that in what they know how. And like Sally is a beautiful character. It's a wonderful character, one of my favorite characters in this show after watching it again and again at this point. But like how she and how she just tries to break through from those clutches of other people.
Right. I will say though that watching this from the perspective of people that are in the entertainment industry, it apparently did not even think about this, is a very different experience than people that are not. I did not really know that or think about that until I talked to my family about it. Yeah. My family, they watched the show and we started talking about it, right? And all of them were like, oh, I hate Sally. Like, Sally's just so annoying. And I'm like, well, yeah, but there's a reason for all that. Like, you know, like she really does have to like play the game and meet with her agent. Yeah. And like if she wants that career, like that is what she has to do and everything. Yeah. And they're like,
and having the constant battle with herself of like how to be honest with myself and with the people around me.
Right. And
another
they're
theme.
Like, okay,
Jesus.
Then she shouldn't be like stringing Barry along for that ride because it's like super irresponsible and it's just like playing with Barry. And I'm like, no, she really cares for him. Yeah. And they're like, she clearly doesn't, or else she would like give a little bit of leeway.
But like everybody okay, fine. Like I brought up that like Fuchs and Gene are probably the most narcissistic people in this show, but like that doesn't necessarily mean nobody else is narcissistic.
Yeah, true.
I would argue Sally absolutely narcissistic and Barry absolutely narcissistic.
Yeah. But I think that's more of an arc for Barry. He hasn't always been, you know? Like I think that's something that has grown over time is this like there's not really a way of him doing what he wants to do without being narcissistic. That like really one of his first selfish decisions in the show is continuing to take the class. Like that's you know what I mean? And like it's just kind of grown from there because he kind of has to.
But then it leads to bigger and bigger actions,
Yeah.
which, like, for example, killing Janice.
I was about to say, killing
Right.
Janice is nothing but selfish. I mean, oh man, there was this one moment.
And not being honest about, like, his experiences and, like, being honest
Uh-huh.
about the things that he's done.
There was this one
Another
moment in
narcissistic
episode 1 that was, I think, one of the most telling moments for Barry. Is
Well said.
sorry. Well, whenever they're talking about like canceling the show, right? Like that they were going to put on in season or episode 1 that they eventually put on in at the very end. That whenever they're not going to put on the show, and Barry's super mad because he's like, I think he actually says under his breath at one point, like, then what was it for?
What was the point?
Then what was the point exactly of killing Janice? And because it's like, I killed Janice so that I could continue doing this, and now we're not going to do
You're
it.
so
What the
right.
hell?
I didn't read into that subtext. Well, because I was intrigued by that line, but, like,
Yeah.
I was still trying to watch the rest of the show, so
Yeah,
I
fair,
just
fair.
forgot about it
It
eventually.
goes really like low under the radar, but I think that's the first moment of like, that's a really f***ed up thing to say, Barry. Let's just due to time, let's move on. Anthony Kerrigan's No Hank.
Wonderful. His monologue that he delivers at the end of the first or the second episode is stellar when he's just standing outside the car and he's essentially like, "Don't f with me, Barry."
So good. I think that's the first episode.
Is immaculate. And I remember the first time I watched that, I was glued to
Yes.
the screen. Because it was both, like, in NoHo Hank's own way, but it was
Yeah.
also this rich amount of honesty that was being brought, and, like, how high the stakes were for NoHo Hank and how high the stakes he had to make it for Barry. And I
Right.
thought Anthony Kerrigan met that level immaculately while still bringing that sort of charm that NoHo Hank has
Well,
throughout the rest of the series.
I think what's so genius about Anthony Kerrigan's take on NoHo Hank is that whenever he's getting scary and whenever he's getting in someone's face, and especially in that monologue, it's not coming from a scary place. Like, it's coming from a place of hurt. Like, he is scary, but he's scary because he's being led by his emotions and not by, like, his decisions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, like, whenever he's talking and he's like, you know, like, don't f with me. Like, am I still an idiot now? It's not coming from a place of, like, I'm trying to scare you. It's coming from a place of, like, you hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
And not in, like, a funny comedy way, in, like, you actually hurt my feelings like, very badly. Like, I really
Like,
love you.
and also you
That's
misunderstand
so
the
sad.
relationship
Yeah.
that we have.
Like, it's simultaneously, like, funny for a second, but, like, it's just it's so good. It's so smart. Yeah, I love NoHo Hank so much.
And I love that monologue, and it's a treat every time I watch it.
I would go as far as to say, and I don't think this is a silly serve. I think I need to preface this at all. I think that he's one of the best characters on television today. NoHo Hank. You think it's a social serve?
I don't know. I'm having trouble. I don't watch that much television
How
anymore.
about this? By Barry season 3,
Okay.
show up to that episode with a retort. If you could come in giving me 3 or 4 characters on TV that are better.
Now?
You can research as much as you that are on television being made right now.
It's probably, I mean, I don't know, Saul Goodman probably from Better Call Saul maybe, but I'm not watching that show. You're shaking your head, but we're not watching that show, so
Okay.
you can't say definitively.
Okay, you're right. We'll talk about it. So, Henry Winkler's Gene Cousineau.
Fantastic. And just
Yes.
that navigation of, like, the denial of grief, but also the dealing with grief as well.
I also
And just the
think-
silence that, like, Gene Cousineau, like,
about to say.
has in moments is just
It's
immaculate.
I think it's genius that whenever they're talking about stress coming from these, like, fight or flight people, it's really, really interesting to I've always, like, whenever I've experienced stress like that or panic like that, it's always led me to numbness. Like, I'm still acting, I'm still moving, and I'm still doing things, but, like, inside I just feel like this, like, empty, like I can't deal with it yet, and it's like I'm just pushing it down.
Yeah.
This numbness that I've never quite seen as beautifully and perfectly.
Potently.
Yes, yeah, I've never seen it done. Oh, it's 2-minute warning,
We're in the
folks.
2-minute warning.
2-minute warning. Watch out. I've never seen it as well as Henry Winkler's Gene Cousineau. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that I'm not really sure if I want to get into many of the smaller characters. I think that yeah.
May I say, like, I think Henry Winkler is my favorite actor in the show. Sally is my favorite character. in this show.
Okay,
I
yeah.
love watching them work and explore and all of that. I want to give quick news segment. That's right, really, really fast. Best new addition. We're going to call it the free agent pickup.
Free agent pickup.
Is the character of Lindsay, played by Jesse Hodges, who is Sally's agent. And I think it's really, really well done that they introduce a character that
She's
is
really good, too.
She, first of all, really well performed, really
actor.
honest, really beautiful, really wonderful, and like somebody that's in Sally's corner as well.
Yes.
And to give Sally a teammate, which is really, really important, and I think does wonders for Sally's development.
There was an absurdity we were talking about in season 1 that was very frustrating about all of the actors, right? That I think whenever you add a character like Lindsay, she not only raises the stakes for these characters, but she also justifies all of their stupid shit. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Every time they do something that's out of left field that you're like, that just broke the reality of the show for me and the honesty of the show for me, she makes it honest.
And a truly supportive person as well.
Absolutely.
Which I think is just like literally what Sally needs.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go ahead and tack on and say, because we haven't talked about them yet, Cristobal.
Yeah.
Michael Irby's Cristobal, beautiful. I love that character. Everything he does for NoHo Hank, in a similar way to Lindsay, I think that he really justifies a lot of that stuff. Danny, what are we consuming next?
We're gonna watch a movie that's really, really bad, and neither of us have seen it, and so we're just gonna figure out what happened with such a stellar cast. It's a movie called Movie 43.